Be Tuesday, Mr. Dan Rubenstein, sir.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the pod. How goes it, my friend?
Pretty good. I shouldn't admit this publicly because it's going to sound weirder than it actually was. But I went to bed early on Sunday nights like I normally do because I don't get much sleep Saturday nights. So I'm just a wreck all day on Sunday. And so when I get that deeper sleep, because I went to sleep at, 9 o'clock or something last night, I get like solid 9 to 6:15, 6:30 night of sleep, which I'm sure you're very jealous. You don't sleep anymore.
No.
But I always have these very vivid dreams, both because I'm always injured and my body is trying to heal itself. And so I get into deeper sleep. And because I just slept longer, I'm almost positive I dreamt in a totally G-rated way, Ty.
Where are we going with this?
About
Where are we going with this?
Nick and Terry Saban. And nothing at all inappropriate. It was literally, I think I was like
That's good.
on tour with Nick Saban, but Miss Terry was involved, and she was like,
I love that you felt the need to specify that. No. It was entirely G-rated, as if it wouldn't be if you're dreaming about Nick and Terry.
If anybody has ever listened to this show, you know that my brain goes to non-G-rated places, probably more often than it should for a 41-year-old father of two. But I'm saying right now, it was just odd. Hey, real quick, it'd be great if you could consider subscribing to the YouTube channel down below. It really helps us out.
Should we start with our new Verballer Top 12 poll?
Would love to.
We've been doing this every week. You can go and sign up at verballers.com to vote in our Verballer Top 12 poll. Some movement, as you might expect, given the results that we saw on Saturday of Week 11. Ole Miss is now back in the conversation, tipping the scales at number 12, followed up by Miami at 11. Georgia drops down to number 10. Alabama peeking its way back into the top 10 now, all the way up to 9. We've got Notre Dame holding steady at number 8. We've got BYU up to 7. Tennessee up to 6. Of note, because Tennessee and Georgia do play this week.
Yeah.
So there will be further movement in this poll the next time we get together on a Tuesday. Penn State up to 5. Indiana up to 4. An incredible story in college football right now. Indiana all the way up to 4. Texas 3. Ohio State 2. Oregon all the way up to number 1. Holding steady, I should say, at number 1. So of note here, when you look at this, we've got Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, and Penn State, 4 Big Ten teams in our Verballer top 5, Dan. Any reactions to the way that sets up?
Yeah, I'd kick BYU down a few spots. I might be inclined to put Penn State ahead of Indiana after Saturday's performances, and this is no slight on Indiana, but Penn State finally showed that it had the throttle gene against a decent average, whatever kind of team in Washington. And so that does it for me. As I've talked about before, I'd put Notre Dame ahead of BYU. I'd put Alabama ahead of BYU. I know people are going to point to, well, BYU's undefeated and not losing is a skill. Well, we'll get to it. The specific way in which they haven't lost, specifically against Utah, I don't know if it gives me the warm fuzzies. Everybody's allowed to win clunkers, but this is a Utah team. Started their third string quarterback. Yes.
Right.
I just, you got to impress me week by week. And I don't want to be too much of a prisoner of the moment, he says, as he's being a prisoner of the moment. But BYU hasn't been that throttle team either. And so if I'm going to hold Penn State to that standard, if we're going to say, what an incredible year so far for BYU, but then they want to be my latex salesman as like a top 5, 6, 7 team, I'm going to hold them to a higher standard. And they are not separating. They are not throttling. They do not seem to have that in a rivalry game on the road, but not terribly far away, of course. There's a few marks against BYU. There's some demerits there for me.
Some demerits, and I don't want you to go too far down the path with BYU because this is, in effect, a pretty BYU-themed episode.
Oh, no.
Well, it is.
What did we get ourselves into? Yeah.
It is. We're not going to talk exclusively about BYU. That's not what this is about.
Right.
We are going to recap that Utah game, the 22-21 victory over Utah here in a few minutes. But then we've got our Verballer segment that is going to talk about BYU-ish topics as it relates to other teams. We'll get into that. I don't want to give away the game too much. The one that I think stands out to me the most is Georgia.
Yeah.
I look up and down this top 12 right now, and I have a pretty good sense for who all these teams are.
Yeah.
Right? BYU, we can have a discussion about BYU. But Georgia's the one that stands out to me the most just because I really don't know which direction this program's headed. I think they're fine from a program standpoint. But what I mean is just within the context of this season, I don't know what to expect next from Georgia. And it's of interest because they square off against another team that I could say many of the same things about in Tennessee this weekend. The big game in Week 12 is Georgia against Tennessee. One of those two teams is probably getting in the playoff the way things stand right now.
Right.
I kind of don't know what to expect from that game because both teams are on similar timelines for my money.
I just think Georgia's getting so much credit for what they were in 2021 and 2022.
I agree.
I agree. Like you see Georgia and you think, man, that Texas game, you're like, that was a week. But we're talking about resumes now. We're heading into Week 12. Is my math correct? My state school college?
Correct.
That was a week. And the rest of Georgia's season has been fine. Not great. And people are like, well, you can't drop Georgia from like 3 to 15. Why not? Do whatever you feel is in your heart, okay? And having Georgia behind, so we've had 11 weeks of college football, and we're like, okay, here's where we are. We have culminated with Ole Miss basically throttling Georgia. Let's keep Ole Miss behind them. What?
Right.
Why? What is it that is in your heart that says, like, well, you got to keep Georgia ahead of Ole Miss? No, you don't. You just watch them play. Georgia couldn't compete. They were lost against Ole Miss. So why keep them behind there? Because Ole Miss lost to Kentucky 7 weeks ago or whatever? That's stupid, Ty. This is an absolute stupid poll. We've got a bunch of brilliant people in the For Ballers voting on this. I'm just saying I disagree with how, like, Ole Miss would throttle BYU in this moment. Are you kidding me?
Stop it. You're going to give away the game.
No, hold on. I think Notre Dame's better than BYU. And
Stop it. I've got a game.
I know.
I don't want you to do this.
Let's just talk about outside of the top 25 then, or outside of the top 12.
Hold your horses here for a second. This points to, I think, a broader discussion that we have every year around this time.
Yeah.
And it's two schools of thought when it comes to ranking teams. There is one school of thought that looks at it and says, well, if Georgia played so-and-so tomorrow, this would be the point spread.
Right.
If Georgia played Alabama tomorrow, they'd be, a 3-point favorite. I don't know what that point spread would be. I'm just making this up.
Right.
There are people that I think look at this and they tend to rank teams based on what the point spread would be, the Vegas model, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really subscribed to that model. I think partially it always kind of hangs in the back of my mind who I think is better than whom. But this is the time of year where I start looking at resumes.
Sure.
As you just described, on some level, you have to take a resume for what it's worth. BYU is probably the bone of contention that we can get into here as we get into our game. But BYU at this point is undefeated in a power conference. The resume, I guess, builds a little bit more each week. We can discuss the merits of their wins, but I look at BYU and it's like, well, though I don't necessarily feel confident in their chances against a team like Georgia, it feels to me like they are finding ways to improve week in and week out, certainly at the quarterback position. They're finding ways to win those moments, which is not something Georgia has proven it can do on any kind of consistent basis. So I tend to get, I think, a little bit muddled in my own head with respect to which model am I using to rank these teams. But I think I come down more on the resume side of things once we get into mid-November, because I don't like replaying the point spread argument over and over again and saying, aha, that's why this team should be ranked ahead. On some level, it's like, how many losses do you have, and does it feel like you're getting better?
Right. If you're beating a fully collapsing Utah team by 1 late, lucky, we'll get there. If you're beating a fully collapsing Oklahoma State team by 3 and giving up 35 points in the process, win your clunkers. But at a certain point, you're just infected with clunkitis. And that's what BYU is right now. And you're an undefeated team in a power conference. Yes, you should be in the top 10. But, like, let's not look at a record like, well, you got to put them number 5. You got to put them number 6. No, you don't have to do anything.
I'm not arguing for 5. I am arguing them as a top 12 team. I think they should be in the top 12.
Well, they'll automatically be number 4 or whatever if they win the conference.
I think they're a top 12 team. Given where they're at right now and given where the sport is at, I think I have no problem putting BYU in my top 12. I did put BYU in my top 12.
But I would have them like 10, 11.
I had them pretty low. And I think I had Georgia fully out in mind because if I am focused a little bit more on who is getting better and who is finding ways to improve their resume, BYU has the nod over Georgia right now.
I agree.
It's a weird place to be, but that's where I'm at. By the way, 13 through 16 is Boise State, SMU, Army, and Texas A&M.
Yeah.
For whatever that's worth to you. We will get into that.
Am I seeing this wrong? We have Washington as the number 19 team?
In this poll, Washington is the number 19 team.
What? Why?
But because of the way it's calculated, don't read too deeply into that. Okay? That is not necessarily indicative of where our verballerhood is at.
Is it calculated by like a series of orangutans? What is the methodology that gives us Washington as a top 20 team right now?
They got a couple votes. That's what it comes down to.
Oh my God. Can we ban whoever voted for Washington in the top 20? Can we afford to ban those voters?
We can't afford to ban those voters, no. We need that income.
Was Washington like near another good team on like where to select them on the page?
It's not a bulletproof method, Dan.
Was it Sausage Thumbs McGee? Like, I think Washington, maybe I'm wrong. No, what is going on with this poll? I am just flabbergasted by this one, Ty, and I can't wait to dive in deeper.
I want to talk about the Holy War.
Yeah.
Let's take a look back at BYU 22, Utah 21.
Okay.
So here's what happened if you stayed up late, even if you didn't. Utah stopped BYU on 4th down late in the game.
Yes.
It was a play. If it holds, Utah wins the game. They get the ball back to the ice if the game's over. Instead, the officials call a defensive holding penalty, which gives BYU an automatic first down. BYU then drives down the field. They get in field goal range. They end up kicking a 44-yarder to win it. Both Kyle Whittingham and the AD for Utah, Mark Harlan, were irate. After this one, Harlan was fined something like $40,000 for the critical comments he made about the officiating. Of note, very soft call. Okay?
And
my opinion, we disagree.
Was there a closer angle? I saw that there was a far away angle of the defensive holding. They pulled back.
Not that I saw. There was a little bit of holding right off the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Felt like a very soft call to me.
Oh, he got touched. Oh my God.
Yeah. Very soft call, in my opinion.
I think at best soft. Yeah.
But BYU finds a way to win this one.
Yeah.
They kick that 44-yarder. They win 22-21. You and I have both gone back now and rewatched this game.
Yes.
This game to me was a great point of reference for why I'm not higher on BYU.
Mm-hmm.
BYU is finding ways to win moments. And that in and of itself is a skill.
Yeah.
Returned a kick for a touchdown in this one. Scored one offensive touchdown, kicked 2 field goals.
Yeah.
Had like 2 big plays all game.
Mm-hmm.
Made a couple conversions, but had like 2 big plays in this game, Dan. It reminded me a little bit of the game we saw a couple weeks back against K-State, where they had a big play on defense in that one, a scoop and score. Picked up 2 other turnovers deep inside K-State territory that basically catapulted them to 21 points. So they're good at capitalizing when they have those moments.
Right.
It's just the rest of the game. The rest of the game is what makes me a little bit leery about this team. Like, if you have to go toe-to-toe and if the opponent isn't making mistakes, what does that version of BYU look like against that team?
Agree.
I think that is the sticking point for me with respect to BYU. Now, Jake Retzlaff has been really good. He is absolutely the engine for this BYU team.
He led them to one offensive touchdown this game, right? Not 2.
One offensive touchdown.
But more than 0. Must be really good. Continue.
I think he is getting better.
Okay.
I stand by that. He makes plays. He was really good in this game when he had time.
Yeah.
It just, I don't think there is that much of a supporting cast around him.
Okay.
And so not that I want to add this name to our upcoming portal pool that we're going to run at forballers.com. I don't even know if that's possible, but
right.
Jake Retzlaff with more of a supporting cast would be an interesting conversation. As it stands, he, for my money, is the main offensive weapon for this BYU team. He just finds a way to make plays. I was discouraged by the fact that the O-line seemed overwhelmed at times by a good Utah front.
Definitely.
Which is why I qualify all my Retzlaff statements by saying when he had time, because there were a lot of moments in this game when he didn't. How did you feel about this game? How did you feel watching this game? Did it make you feel better or worse about BYU, better or worse about Utah? What's your take?
Okay, so I relate to the Utah AD and Kyle Whittingham. Was it Harlan? Is that the Utah AD?
Yeah.
Harlan and Whittingham immensely. That if this were my team, and this is how my team lost, I would climb up to my roof and start yelling at a bunch of, Indiana and Wisconsin and Iowa fans that I live near and be like, this tragedy cannot stand. I have been absolutely just assassinated by these referees. I would be that person. This is college football. You take everything personally. I'm not going to criticize them for criticizing the refs because of a huge moment, soft defensive holding call, 4th and 10, deep in, I want to say, BYU territory, that seemed to change the outcome of that game. Also, in the two things can be true at the same time, because I'm not a Utah fan, I should point out, Utah went up 21-10 and lost 22-21. This is what Utah did on offense after scoring 21 points in the first half, mind you. 4 plays, punt, 13-yard drive. 2 plays, interception, 0 yards gained in the process. 9 plays for 36 yards, punt. 4 plays, 16 yards, punt. 3 plays, 1 yard, punt. 3 plays, -7 yards, punt. This was not a back and forth. This was not an offense otherwise succeeding or a defense otherwise pitching a shutout. Well, the defense did play well because I think one of the touchdowns was a kickoff return for a touchdown from BYU.
Correct.
That's not on the defense. Were there opportunities for Utah to add 3 points in the second half to effectively win this game? There were, Ty. There absolutely were. But in that moment, when you are seeing that Utah shade of crimson in your eyes, I get the anger. Now, if you need a non-call there to win the game, and by the way, how many plays were run after that defensive holding call? Because that just brought them up, to kind of deep in BYU's own territory. Still opportunities to win that game. I don't know from afar if you can say definitively that referee call is proof that the evil Big 12 has it in for Utah. That's kind of garbage. So, I don't know. I get the anger. I would be there too if I were them. But because I'm not, I'd be like, okay, guys, you had chances and you didn't get it done. But again, I can't say I can dismiss that kind of emotion at the end of the game. So I'm right there with you. I'd rather feel that emotion than be removed enough to be like, well, we had our chances. Oh, well, calls go our way and don't go our way. That's stupid.
Listen, that emotion is why we have a podcast. Why we're able to do this full time. We feed off of that emotion.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think it was a soft call, but also, Utah had more than ample opportunity to get a stop there.
Or they had gotten a field goal in the second half. Yeah.
They had gotten stops on defense before that.
Mm-hmm.
So they had ample opportunity to stop BYU, and BYU, again, to their credit, was able to get down within field goal range, kick the field goal, and win. They just keep finding ways to do this. It will be interesting, though, to see how the rest of the season shakes out for BYU, because right now they are the only undefeated team in the Big 12. There are some interesting scenarios that I think I've outlined before that maybe we can talk through here in a little bit as well. But as it stands, look, if you look at any of these projected playoff brackets out there, BYU's getting a first-round bye. They're getting a first-round bye. Right now, they're looking like they're the team to beat in the Big 12. They win the conference to get that first-round bye, that'd be something else. But not totally convinced of it.
Here's the other thing, too, just within the context of BYU wanting to be my latex salesman, right? They want to show themselves to be a worthwhile top 5, 6, 7, 8 team. That's a Seinfeld reference. Sorry. That's,
correct.
If you're wondering what Ty and I are referencing at any given moment, it's 71% chance it's Seinfeld. If BYU had lost to Baylor or Kansas State or UCF or something, and we were sitting here at whatever, 8-1, 9-1, BYU, I guess it would be 8-1, right?
Yeah.
We would look at that Utah one and be like, gutty win from the Cougars. Right? That, like, maybe they're the 14th or 15th in the country. Like, man, tough spot against a rival on the road. Gutty win when you're not playing well to pull that out. But now you're like, is that what the number 6 team, number 7 team in the country should look like against Utah in this moment? Likely not. So it weirdly goes against them that they're undefeated just in terms of how we appraise that late game performance. That's all.
I think all that's fair. I mean, I came away skeptical after watching this game, and I had many of the same thoughts. Now, going into this week, they are a slight favorite at home against Kansas team that has not been a great team so far this season.
Yeah.
But, got a win over Iowa State a week ago. Maybe they are finding ways to turn things around. They play at Arizona State, which looks like it could be a prickly game. Arizona State is having a pretty good season against all odds. Close out the year at home against Houston. So there are opportunities here for them to lose.
Or throttle. Or show the throttle gene.
Yeah. Or throttle. They are winning moments. They are playing well on special teams. And certainly when they're having an opportunity to convert in a short field, they've proven that they can do that.
We're going to be banned from all the soda shops in Provo after this episode. Yeah.
Some other stuff going on around college football. Not sure if you saw, but Florida State and Mike Norvell fired the offensive coordinator, Alex Atkins, fired defensive coordinator, Adam Fuller, fired the receivers coach, Ron Dugans. Dan, it is going to be starting up here shortly.
Dugans or Duggins?
Either one.
Okay.
Dugans.
Yeah. Big Ron. Yeah.
Fired Big Ron. It is going to be starting up here before you know it. The college football coaching carousel. Mike Norvell has been outspoken that there need to be changes. These guys have been with them since the very beginning of the project. I guess about 5 years now in Tallahassee. So sure, it was a tough decision, but given the state of play, given the throttling they just took on the road against Notre Dame, my guess is that no time like the present to get started. This is a move that probably needed to happen, if only just to save face and prove that need to go in a different direction. So what it looks like with respect to who they bring in, what it looks like with respect to responsibility, is it going to be a situation where the offensive coordinator has total play calling duty, or Mike Norvell has some input into the philosophy of the offense?
I'm sure he will. Yeah.
He's an offensive-minded guy. All of that stuff remains to be seen, but Florida State on the board here with needing 2 new coordinators going into 2025, Dan.
Right.
In terms of news, that's the biggest. In terms of leftover takes, as we do on this episode, I have several, but I've already done a lot of talking.
Well, do you have any takes on Florida State making those changes?
My take is the take that I gave voice to on the Thursday preview episode a week ago.
Okay.
I didn't realize how bad they had gotten.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize, you watch Florida State games, if you're a sadist, and you could see with your own eyes that it's pretty bad.
Yep.
You don't realize how much it's bottomed out until you look at the old spreadsheet. And I said to you on Thursday, they looked like Kent State. There were Kent State teams that I have seen recently where they looked like that on the spreadsheet.
Right.
And so it's just been a full bottoming out of this team. I don't know if that's a coordinator thing, Dan. I don't think that's just a DJU thing. I really don't know what that is.
Okay.
There are probably a million reasons as to why, but literally nothing has taken this season. And I don't care what Mike Norvell is owed, but if he has another year next year like he had this year, he's toast. They won't stand for it 2 years in a row.
I think it's $60+ million
it's like
in this moment.
65-ish million. It's a lot.
Okay.
It's a lot of potatoes.
So if you are an offensive coordinator with an offensive line background and Alex Atkins is credited, or at least partially credited, with helping to rebuild that disastrous offensive line where it was a few years ago at Florida State, and you get them to the point where they are an asset last year, 2023, and they're running the ball well and protecting Jordan Travis well enough. And that offense is, I think, really good last year. Not great, but really good. And the defense last year was somewhere in the vicinity of like a top 10 national defense in terms of points per drive allowed. They were around 30, somewhere between 30 and 40 the year before. And now the offense can't at all stay on the field, can't at all protect a quarterback. The turnovers are mounting. The 3 and outs are mounting, of course. 3 and outs? I don't know. And you're asking a defense to do everything to keep this Florida State team in the game. Somehow I don't think, and maybe Adam Fuller was just a bad fit, maybe just culturally, I don't know. I don't know anything about what's happening inside of Florida State. All I can say is he's probably not a bad defensive coordinator if he's able to get a very talented 2023 squad to that level where they are shutting teams down, even when the offense was struggling like crazy after Jordan Travis got hurt late in the season last year. I understand there has to be a fall guy. And if it's not going to be Mike Norvell, you have to say, okay, maybe we are going to find a defensive coordinator who is better at figuring out duct tape and chicken wire to get this defense off the field more often when the offense is terrible. I just don't know how you put it all in a vacuum. I don't know how you pull it all on the defensive coordinator when the offense was this much of a disaster. The offensive line, I think, was supposed to be somewhat of a strength heading into the season and just weren't performing. And so I understand when your offensive coordinator is also an offensive line guy, like, well, who's going to improve this unit if this unit is this much of a disaster? Obviously, DJU didn't work out. I guess the only real silver lining here with Florida State is whoever they pay to be their next quarterback is going to make enough money to put generations through college.
Yeah.
And whoever that is, pre-congratulations, because it doesn't appear like that quarterback of the future is on this roster in the moment. High-level ACC championship level quarterback is on the roster at this moment. And I don't believe they have a quarterback of the future committed at this point. It looks like a 3-star who's not in the top however many hundred of the recruiting rankings. So maybe this guy's a sleeper. I don't know, but we're at least 2-3 years out from that showing itself to be the case. Florida State is in deep right now. And I hope for the sake of ACC entertainment that they can quickly dig out of it in the portal. But this is the danger in relying too heavily on the portal, is that you don't develop depth. You don't develop, that culture unless you're absolutely nailing the fits and the talent level. And Florida State has a ways to go.
It has not been promising, to say the least. This has been a really bad year.
Yeah.
A really bad year.
They have the number 31 ranked recruiting class for 2025 at the time of this recording.
Yeah.
Rough.
Wild. Speaking of Florida State, let's talk about Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
We haven't had much reason to talk about Oklahoma State lately, but Oklahoma State started 3-0, I believe beat Arkansas in a bit of a shootout, and has since lost 7 straight. They're 3-7 overall. They're 0-7 in conference, dead last in the Big 12. This is a team that I thought would be in the Big 12 title game, if only because of their returning production, if only because of the schedule that seemed very promising. I am not alone in that prediction. I don't believe you were quite as high on the Pokes as I was, but
no.
Even in your wildest dreams, you didn't have them going 0-7 in conference.
I was just a year early on being down on Oklahoma State. Yeah, wrong year.
I'm curious to see what level of accountability we get from Mike Gundy now in light of this. It's been a really bad campaign, and I know a lot of people like Gundy. He's been sort of a mainstay in Stillwater, and he's funny, and he's got the fun hair and all that.
If you really like him, his house is on the market. You can jump on in.
But I'm curious to get the temperature of the Oklahoma State football program from people who listen to this show, many of whom have been vocal about Gundy, about the program in their years of listening to us. We did an interview where we talked specifically about Oklahoma State way back when. I want to say June, May, somewhere in that time frame. And there was a sense that there was like a now or never element to this season because of everything that was coming back, because of the schedule, because of Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12. To put in this kind of campaign is really bad. It's not Florida State bad, but it's close.
Right.
The defense is fully bottomed out. And this was a team, if memory serves, that had 9 starters back. Defense has bottomed out. I know they've had some injuries as well to deal with, but at this point in the season, everybody's kind of in that boat. It just feels like this is such a poor performance that there need to be answers. And
sure,
not necessarily calling for the end of the Mike Gundy era, but after a campaign like this, somebody's got to pay the piper. I can't imagine there are a lot of Pokes fans out there that are all that excited about where things stand right now.
By the way, likely should have lost that Arkansas game in addition.
I know. That's the thing.
So we are dealing with an Oklahoma State program this year that lost to Isaac Wilson, the start of the Utah collapse, 22-19. They lost by 3 touchdowns to Kansas State, 24 points to West Virginia, 3 points to BYU, and a good effort, showing some fight. 10 points to Baylor, 21 points to ASU, and 25 points to TCU. You see that like on the fly math, Ty?
I know.
Do you see what I'm doing here?
I can't do that. There's no way I could do that.
They're not losing to strong teams. They're not losing to bad teams. They're not losing to strong teams. They're not losing to top 10, 15 teams and just have a brutal schedule. They're losing to unranked West Virginia, losing to unranked Baylor, unranked TCU, and it's not close.
No.
I just kind of think things are broken there. And who broke them? Right? Who's finding these quarterbacks? Who's building this roster? Who's getting this team ready for games? Who's getting this team in the right headspace before decent-sized games? It's all Gundy.
The case for Oklahoma State before the season, and even at the end of last, was, well, give Alan Bowman a little bit of credit. Alan Bowman's an experienced hand.
Sure.
Alan Bowman with this cast of characters out wide with Ollie Gordon, right? Like, give him a little bit of credit.
Yeah.
That was what people told me at the end of last year when I was a little bit wishy-washy in Oklahoma State. And to an extent, that was true.
Yeah.
Haven't really been able to run the ball this year. Feels like the line got worse. Ollie Gordon is not having near the campaign he did in 2023. The defense, I remember when they brought over Brian Nardo, brought him down from a small school in PA. Last season, it was like, well, some things are better. This year, it seems like everything's worse. It feels really bad.
Well, at least they tried to put QR codes on their players' helmets for NIL purposes, which I think immediately got shut down, right?
This is not me trying to dunk on
right
Oklahoma State by any stretch.
No, the Big 12 has already done enough of that. Continue.
But it's just like we talk so much about Florida State and how the Noles have bottomed out, and I have not heard a whole lot of discussion about Oklahoma State, maybe because, the Big 12 is sort of fun and wacky, and there are 1,000 possibilities, one of which I'll talk about next. But I just want to make sure people understand what's going on in Stillwater as well, because that's equally as depressing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you pointed out, by the way, I don't know if it was in the recap show or a preview show, something. How many teams in the MAC are 5-4 in this moment? 6
out of the 12 are 5-4.
Buddy, you look at any conference, these giant conferences, everybody's 3-3, 4-5, 5-4, whatever. It's never been easier to be mediocre in college football in terms of filling up your roster, filling up. So, we have, a hole at linebacker. All right, let's go to Sam Houston, get their best linebacker, whatever. It's never been easier to build a complete roster and even the playing field in these conferences. And Oklahoma State is the team that says, it's still pretty hard for us, guys. It's still pretty hard for us.
It's just such a disappointment. Yeah. It's such a disappointment because I remember specifically when we had that discussion about Oklahoma State, I believe it was Scott Wright from the Oklahoman.
Yeah.
The framing of our questions, the framing of that whole debate was, is it an Oklahoma State thing keeping them
right
from achieving more? Is it a Texas and Oklahoma thing standing in their way, preventing them from achieving more? You could argue a little bit of both, but it's been an interesting experiment to see what would happen if those two schools, founding members of the conference, leave, and it's just Oklahoma State standing there with a bunch of returning production and a schedule that seemed favorable.
Yeah.
Hasn't worked. Has not worked at all.
It's almost like when, I don't know if it was last year for you, when I built the altar of Dan because I was the surest thing in college football picking because I was like 28% against the spread, which is actually really good. It's very difficult to be that bad in that same way, it's very difficult to be 0-7 in the Big 12.
Yeah.
There is so much within a standard deviation of mediocrity in this conference that you think you would have accidentally beaten two of these teams. And Oklahoma State can't even do that. It's actually like what Purdue has done, what Oklahoma State has done, what Florida State has done. It's really difficult. It's really, really difficult to not just happen into 2 or 3 wins in one of these conferences.
Let me stay in the Big 12 here.
Yeah.
Credit to the walk-on redshirts who tweeted out something about this, and it got me thinking and looking into it a little bit more.
Please.
There is a scenario in which Utah beats Colorado this weekend. West Virginia wins out and gets into a 3-way tie for second place, wins the tiebreaker, and goes to the Big 12 title game.
Okay.
ESPN puts the odds of this at 2.3%.
Okay.
And it would require a 3-way tie in order for it to work. But I was thinking about this a lot because we've talked a fair amount about West Virginia. I was really high on West Virginia coming into the year. And things haven't quite gone to that plan. They, of course, had decided to keep Neil Brown around to whatever degree at the end of last season. Remember, that was the big debate. Kind of turned the year around and brought Neil Brown back again. But now, again, there are people calling for his head because this has been a bit of a disappointing campaign. Would this not be the greatest trick Neil Brown ever played on the West Virginia fan base if he went to a title game, won a title game, and got a first-round bye in a college football playoff game?
Okay, so 2 of his final 3 games are at home, and all West Virginia does is lose in Morgantown. They exclusively lose in Morgantown, pretty much.
There's a reason it's 2.3%.
I know.
I think it's 0.6%. It's less than 1% of making the playoff. But
yeah,
because the Big 12 is a bit of a hash at the minute, and because it feels like it's an anything-goes weekend every time these guys play, just want to call this out, that there is a possibility out there, because you know I like my crazy tiebreaker scenarios.
Yeah, of course.
Where West Virginia ends up playing for something.
Yeah, there's also a possibility that starting tonight, you start working on your vertical jump and really hammering your quads and your squats and doing all sorts of exercises, and you're just impressing everybody at the Y with your tomahawk jams next summer, Ty. There's a 2.3% chance of that happening. But
could you dunk if you worked on your vertical leap?
Sure.
You think you could do it?
Yeah, I'm around 6'1", depending on how much I've shrunk in my old age. Right. Yes, I definitely could. I am of average athleticism that if I did nothing but train, sure, I think I could. But
it would be an interesting off-season endeavor for us to both hammer the glutes, hammer the calves, and see if one of us can dunk by the start of the season.
Yeah, I think there's like very straightforward exercises. You just have to do it every day. I'm just saying I appreciate the wild nature of this possibility. But it's hard for me to even to squint and see it happening. Even the Utah beating Colorado element of this is very difficult in this moment.
We're both pretty high on Colorado, so
yeah, they're probably going to win this conference.
My final thing here that I jotted down. I'm sure you've got stuff. I want to turn the floor over to you. I've been doing a lot of talking. I apologize.
No, people prefer it.
Is Nebraska going to get the 6 wins?
Ooh, it's a good question.
On a bye last week, but coming off of a loss against UCLA.
Yeah.
3 games left. At USC, home against Wisconsin, on the road at Iowa. Should be favored at home against Wisconsin, maybe by 3 points, maybe by 3 points. I think they are a dog against the other 2 on the road.
Yeah.
This season started off like a ball of fire with Dylan Raiola. Since then, there has definitely been more of a normalization effect that has taken on. Audio term for the dorks out there. Hello, my name's Ty. I'm not so sure they're getting the 6 wins, Dan. And I'm curious to know from Nebraska fans how they feel about this. What is your vibe on this season? How has this felt to you as a Nebraska fan?
Oh, opening up a can of rancid corn here. Probably not great.
It just feels like a lot of treading water.
But
like positive things. Like you still feel good about Dylan Raiola, but he's a true freshman, and he started to show he's more of a true freshman. Took Ohio State to the gun, so we know that the defense can play well.
Yeah.
Offense still a very big question. Are they going to get the 6 wins, Dan? Would you bet on them getting the 6 wins right now? They need 1. They just need to win one of those 3.
Yeah. It's never been easier to be an average team. Nebraska has some issues, and they are turning to the knight in shining armor with a skullet and a Four Loko of some kind in his hands. Dana Holgerson. Phil Snow's back as a sort of consultant of some kind. Hasn't really been the defense's issue. I mean, defense was an issue against Indiana, but otherwise, they've held teams down. I mean, it was, 24 points in regulation, Illinois. Everybody else is scoring about 20 points. UCLA scored 27, have a bye week going into the SC game. Another broken team in USC, so maybe there's opportunity there. They're making a quarterback change, going to Jaden Mayava. Wisconsin seems pretty broken on offense. Iowa's good, but they just went and lost to UCLA. It's never a good place to be in when you're just like, we just need one of these games against an average team to go our way. And so the Matt Rule vibes so far, very good for Nebraska. The Matt Rule results, what has changed from year 1 to year 2? Results-wise, I guess fewer turnovers on offense. There's more optimism for the future. But I don't know. It feels pretty similar. And I don't know, man. I think Matt Rule gave a press conference and he was asked something like, what do you see as like big picture being wrong with the offense? And I'm paraphrasing here. And his answer was just like, it's a good question, man. It's a good question. Like, he was deep in his feelings, in his thoughts in that moment. And unfortunately, it seems to be a recurring theme with some Matt Rule teams, both in college and in the pros.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
So, yes, they absolutely have an opportunity to go to their first bowl game since, 2016?
Yep.
They'll be excited to do so. Beating Nebraska beating Wisconsin would be great. Beating SC and LA would be great. At Iowa is going to be very difficult for them. But when was the last time this team scored, 30 points would have been Northern Iowa? So the last time they scored, have they scored 30 points against an FBS team?
It has been a minute.
Not Colorado, not Illinois, not Purdue, not Rutgers, not Indiana, not Ohio State, not UCLA.
I'll tell you one interesting wrinkle for the game this weekend. It's at 4:00 on Fox, Nebraska on the road at USC. I jotted it down on our shared spreadsheet. USC -9. Let's just go ahead and take the +9. All these teams do is play one-score games against most of the teams on their schedule.
Yeah.
I would take those points happily before it comes down, and I think it will come down.
Yeah. And you're supposed to get better as your true freshman quarterback gets more comfortable. Supposed to get things are supposed to get easier. And who broke them? Rutgers broke them? Was that the theory? No. They got infected with some scarlet fever?
Yep.
That's tough.
By the way, I found our snow advisory sound from back in the day.
Oh.
This cloud cover coming up through Waco.
Defense isn't the problem.
That was the old Phil Snow sound, yeah. No. It was that. I think that was intended as a compliment for Phil Snow.
No, but I'm saying bringing in Phil Snow to consult. I
know
that defense has been truly it was a problem against Indiana, but otherwise.
I'll look for it here. I also have a Dana Holgerson sound that I used to play back in the day. I'll find that one. What are your takes here? What are your thoughts, your leftover emotions from Week 12 before we turn it over to our game and let the fine people go?
Emotions. I watched Washington, Penn State for the first time because you're just not going to convince me to dedicate a TV to Peacock unless it's my team or a huge game. And didn't watch that. Penn State looked impressive. Washington could not at all get to Drew Aller. He was very clean. They generated easier plays against this Washington defense. Washington could not at all block Penn State up front. I came away very impressed by the effort and the ability to finish from the Penn State defensive front. I again hated to see Penn State's goal line-ish offense, like inside the 10. We're like, let's go to the backup quarterback and the tight end to take things over. We're just like, this might be why you're struggling on 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th and goal against Ohio State, that you don't have consistently successful reps and opportunities for Drew Aller in high leverage moments. And it's just, let's do some fun stuff with Bo Pribula. Ty obviously has said that Bo Pribula might be better than Drew Aller. So there's that.
I don't think I said that. I never said that.
You went up 3 octaves. You're like, after he showed out against somebody.
That was raw emotion talking.
Okay.
And I was subsequently slapped down from that perspective from folks in the YouTube comments.
Yeah. Ty Ever the hoe for Bo.
Yeah.
So no, that was the issue I had. We're like, it's fun that you have a direct snap to Tyler Warren and he like jumps over the pile and scores a touchdown, or it's fun that Bo Prabula runs it in from 7 yards out. But what's going to happen against a team in the Big Ten championship game or next year against Ohio State or whoever? And it's, whoever the starting quarterback is next year, because Drew Aller is eligible, right, to be drafted?
Yeah, correct.
I don't know. That sort of, what are you doing against the average teams, the below average teams, to get your team more and more comfortable? That's where I started paying attention to Penn State. Dominant performance. They weren't as good in the second half, but you play differently when you're up, whatever it was, 28-3 than you do when it's 14-0. But Washington seems to be like a team that is suddenly very much in flux. After seeming decent, Will Rogers really struggled against Penn State. Yeah. And so they made the change. I think it's Damon Williams, the backup for Washington. I thought he had a spark. I thought he gave him something interesting. That's all I have on that game.
What else you got for me?
As for delayed reactions, we talked about BYU, Utah. Of the top teams, I think we sort of went through everything, top 25-ish. That was interesting. Hold on, I'm loading my notes up here, Ty. Otherwise, I'm just glad Maction, early to midweek Maction is back. I came away very impressed with Duke against NC State. And that was a game in which I thought NC State was going to win, but the Duke defense just smothered them. Really showed a lot of looks at CJ Bailey that he could not ingest properly, I guess is a weird way of phrasing it. But that, especially given how they lost to SMU, I'm making note that Manny Diaz has this Duke team in like a healthy spot mentally to go and win that game on the road against NC State the week after. We didn't talk about too much with Michigan, Indiana. Michigan's going to need to spend a lot of money on an offensive coordinator in the next month or two, because you can point to the quarterback stuff. You keep putting in Alex Orji, and everybody knows what's coming. It's a run or a trick play of some kind. That's it.
Yeah, I've looked at
in those big moments in the red zone. Continue.
I looked at one point on GameOnPaper.com, our friends over at Game on Paper.
Yeah.
And they do a thing where they will calculate expected points added, EPA per play per player.
Yes.
Right, which will show you who is contributing to a team winning, who is contributing to a team's troubles. At one point in the game, and I don't know where it finished up, Alex Orji was almost negative 2 points per play every time he was in the game, every time he was getting a carry in this game this past weekend against Indiana. So just they find a way to quantify it. We can see it with our own eyes. He doesn't add anything to the offense.
Right.
And that was the beef that I had with him in that Oregon game. Yeah. And just the way that they are using him seems a bit puzzling. It's one thing if you're going to bring him in for a series. It's one thing if you're going to bring him in to at least give the threat of throwing the football, but they're not even doing that. We saw down at the goal line against Oregon.
Yeah.
The threat of throwing the football came from a wide receiver. It didn't even come from Orji. It was like an end-around pass, a throwback. So he is offering nothing with respect to any kind of variability in the offense. You bring him in, the expectation is he's going to run. Everybody knows he's going to run.
Yeah.
I just don't know why they keep doing it.
I mean, Michigan's running an offense in which it seems that they don't care who's on the offense. This is what they're going to run come hell or high water. And that's a Sherrone Moore problem. That's not
Colston Loveland, is having a great season.
He's great. Should have transferred somewhere good. And it's all sort of for naught, other than the fact that I'm sure he loves Michigan. So good for him. Otherwise, across the sport, Tulane's lurking, man. I watched some of that game. I didn't watch a lot of the game, but they just destroyed Temple like immediately.
Tulane versus Navy this week.
I can't wait.
Tulane favored by about 6.5 points against Navy. That game's at high noon on ESPN2. That'll be an interesting contest that certainly has real significance in the American, certainly has real significance, I think, with just an eye for that G5 playoff spot.
Yeah.
There's only a select few teams that I think at this point have a real shot at it. And Tulane's one of them. They might need some help, but they're one of them.
I think they're good. I don't know if I recognize that West Virginia. I went back and watched West Virginia, Cincinnati. West Virginia scored 17 points against Cincinnati and got a scoop and score touchdown and a pick six.
Yep.
Win how you can. Good for West Virginia, but that's why they're in your miracle position to apparently win the Big 12.
Crazy. All right.
But yeah, that's all I have.
Let's play our Verballer game real quick.
Okay.
Dan Rubenstein.
Talk to me.
You're the contestant today in a little game we're calling here in the solid variable greater than or less than. I am going to give you a list of teams. You need to tell me how you think that team would fare against others in our Verballer Top 12 poll, Dan.
Okay.
Do you like my game show voice? How
You
did I
nailed
do?
it. You absolutely nailed it.
Starting off with a team that has a 59% chance of making the college football playoff. They are in our Verballer Top 12 poll. Not all of these teams are going to discuss are. How many teams in our Verballer Top 12 poll would BYU beat? Dan Rubenstein, I presume you've got the Verballer Top 12 poll in front of you.
Yeah.
I will link it up in the description to this here episode so that people can refer back to it as well. Right now, we've got BYU at number 7. Again, just to recap, it's Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Indiana, Penn State, Tennessee. That's your top 6. To round things out, it's BYU at 7, followed by Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia, Miami, and Ole Miss. So of those 12 teams, of those other 11 teams, I guess.
Yeah.
Recite for me the names of the teams that you think BYU would beat if they made it into the playoff.
I think the team I would wager on BYU to beat most confidently, I guess, would be Miami. Just because of the Miami defense and letting teams, go long stretches, scoring points, and Jake Retzlaff could have some success and has scored points with BYU this year.
What about Indiana?
I would take Indiana. They're buttoned up. They throttle teams. Now, they didn't throttle Michigan. They didn't do anything in the second half. I think they were a little bit beat up on the offensive line, but whatever. I'm more confident in Indiana right now to win in more ways than BYU can.
The thing that really made me unnerved about BYU was...
And by the way, I would take Miami, but I think BYU can beat Miami.
The thing that really set me off was I felt like they got owned at the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the teams on this list, maybe with the exception of Indiana, but Indiana's been pretty buttoned up, as you said. All of these teams have really good line play, defensive line play. That would be the matchup that would concern me.
Yeah.
And I think to the point of what we saw in that Utah game, they didn't lean as heavily on Mekhi Bernard as I think they could have. But whether it was Brandon Rose who got the start at quarterback or whether it was Bernard himself, they were able to get things going on the ground. I feel like most of the teams in this list could do that as well.
I agree.
I'm just not sold on BYU beating a team like an Ole Miss, which we know has really good line play, which we know can run the football as well when they want to. Certainly Ohio State with all their weapons and how good they've been, at least on the defensive line side of things. Oregon, I mean, that goes without saying. Maybe Indiana, but it's a maybe for me.
Maybe.
I'm not sure they beat more than one team on this list.
Again, we would be so much more impressed with BYU if they had lost a game.
I know.
Weird to say, but I think that's true because now we're looking at them through a different shade of lens.
Ole Miss, 61% chance of making the college football playoff. By the way, this is per the ESPN FPI.
Okay.
As you look at this top 12, they are number 12. Do they beat Miami?
I would, yes.
We just saw they beat Georgia, so that's 2. Do they beat Alabama? They play?
I'm 50-50 on that just because of the struggles, but it's not Nick Saban Bama. Yeah.
Do they beat Notre Dame?
I would feel on a neutral field decently about their chances to beat Notre Dame. Yeah.
I think we feel similarly about BYU. That's 4 teams.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee?
Healthy Nico. I'd probably take Tennessee because Ole Miss has had trouble against teams that are...
I would take Ole Miss, Dan. Come on.
Yeah, Ole Miss has the throttle gene. I'm going to go Ole Miss.
Penn State.
I mean, James Franklin in a big game. Take Ole Miss, yeah.
Indiana.
Probably Ole Miss.
Texas.
Take Texas.
Ohio
I'd
State.
take Ohio State.
Oregon. You take Oregon.
Probably take Oregon.
It's 7 teams.
It's pretty good.
Not bad. I think I agree with you on all of those.
Okay.
Georgia. Georgia's got a 74% chance of making the playoff. But Georgia's in a weird spot. And Georgia plays Tennessee this week, which we will preview on the Thursday episode. I kind of don't know how to answer this for Georgia. The thing that I'm really stuck up on with them is I have no idea which direction the offense is headed. Like, I talked about this a couple weeks back now. You can go back and listen to it. And it was what Georgia is doing on first and second down relative to the run is having a knock-on effect with how they use the pass. And in this instance that we've seen actually the last 2 weeks running now, where Carson Beck isn't as efficient, isn't as responsible with the football, turning the ball over a little bit more, it has like a worrying effect on the whole project on offense. We have seen that persist. I do not feel like this is a team on offense that is getting better. They're still struggling to find some of their playmakers. I think with more pressure on Carson Beck, we are seeing that, there are ways that this team can be attacked that we have not seen in the past. So I see Georgia at 10 in our Baller Top 12 poll, which feels about right to me. I don't know my level of confidence with them beating a number of teams in this list. Like, I feel like they're going to beat BYU. I feel like they probably beat Indiana just because they've got more talent than those schools.
Right.
Miami, there's a question about Miami. You got to score to beat Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Can they score? Don't know.
No, I mean,
Penn State, I think they could beat Penn State.
Sure.
But it's like 50-50 proposition for me as I look up and down this list.
Yeah, I would have them struggling against Notre Dame. I would have them struggling against Tennessee. We'll see. I haven't made a pick for that game yet. That's coming up Saturday, right?
Correct.
I mean, they beat Texas. They beat the number 3 team. So you can't with certainty say anything other than sometimes the real Georgia shows up, but that's also a Georgia team that struggled on offense for a good chunk of that game. So they were able to put the clamps on Texas defensively, but no, I just don't think Georgia is completed. I think they don't know what they want out of their offense, and their secondary has struggled for large stretches of the year. Yeah, I think at their best, they're a top 5 team, and we very rarely get that. So, yeah, I think there'll be 3 or 4 teams on this list.
Let me give you a couple more here. I'm not going to do every team on my list.
Okay.
Indiana has a 93% chance of making the college football playoff.
That's incredible. Good for them.
Can we just take a knee for a second and acknowledge how awesome that is?
Yeah.
For Kurt Cignetti to have this Indiana team with a 93% chance of making the playoff. They're 10-0 for the first time in program history. They've got a big one coming up next week against Ohio State that's going to be very significant.
Yes.
But as things go right now, the way this is shaken out, you win one of those 2, you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly if you beat Ohio State, you're in, I think, one way or another. As you look up and down our top 12, how many of these teams are you confident that Indiana is beating?
1.
See, because here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
If we're going to play it this way with Georgia, if we are, I'm not saying we are, but if people are going to give Georgia credit for who it once was,
right,
there is also an element of this with Indiana, which cuts the other way. Indiana's been a doormat for the majority of time that you and I have done this podcast. They've never been this good.
right.
Not even close to it. So how much is our bias from Indiana of years past creeping into Indiana of present?
No, my bias of Indiana years past does not exist at all in my mind.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
obviously there's like unconscious bias or something. Indiana has played nobody and has treated those teams accordingly. Nobody impressive. Nobody that seems to be like a top 40-ish team. And they played Michigan, who's not that good, and could not adjust at all to what Michigan was doing on defense. And so my bias is being a prisoner of the moment, maybe to too much of a degree, but seeing Indiana at home against a deeply flawed Michigan offense and still a decent Michigan defense, but overall Michigan is not terribly impressive this year. And seeing Indiana struggle in that way with Curtis Rourke on the field, wasn't a Taven Jackson game, that affected me. And they have an opportunity to fully erase that feeling I have, that emotion I have against Ohio State. But when you play Maryland, Northwestern, UCLA, Michigan State, it's super impressive within the context of Indiana. But when you have that opportunity against Michigan and you need every second of that game suddenly, I think they'd beat BYU. But as I look at this list, I think it's a different animal. I think then you're talking about like TCU, Georgia. You're like, oh, this is different. This is a different animal, different change. So, yeah.
Let me ask you this, hypothetically. Yeah. Indiana in 2 weeks beats Ohio State.
Uh-huh. It's a different conversation.
Different conversation, right?
So if you're asking me the same question in 2 weeks after Indiana has beaten Ohio State, how many of these teams, and let's say it's, I don't know, 30-27, something like that against Ohio State?
It would have to be high scoring. It's not going to be a rock fight.
Right.
If they win, they're scoring 33 points.
Right. So how many of these teams? So you'd put Indiana over Ohio State, probably over Texas, depending on how Texas finishes. I'd put Indiana over Penn State, certainly, and they are in this ranking. Yep. Put them over Tennessee, put them over Notre Dame, put them over Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss, whatever. I'd put them over confidently 5 or 6.
Yeah.
They can lose. They can still lose to those teams, but yes, that would go a long way as for me feeling better about, Indiana, Tennessee in what, a Taven Jackson matchup?
Taven Jackson.
And Indiana against Notre Dame, battling for the state supremacy.
All right, 2 more.
Okay.
I'm going to do 2 more here real quick.
Let's.
Colorado.
How many of these teams do I think Colorado could beat?
Colorado right now has about a 27% chance per ESPN of making the college football playoff. You and I think, are of the mind that Colorado's going to win out. And because of
good chance.
Because of the way things have gone in the Big 12, they control their own destiny. They do. They control their own playoff destiny at this point. They need to win the remaining games. They would obviously need to win out over presumably BYU.
Mm-hmm.
Take the Big 12, get a first-round bye, which would be wild. How many of these teams in our Verballer Top 12 poll do you think Colorado could beat? I think they could beat Indiana.
I think they could beat Indiana.
I think they will beat BYU if they play. The thing to bear in mind about this Colorado team is better defense than a lot of people know. Good passing offense.
Yeah.
Doesn't really care much to run.
Right.
Doesn't really care that much to protect Shador because he has still been under assault most of the season. So it's a lot of their wide receiving core, and it's a lot of their defense setting them up. That has been the engine for this season for Colorado. Could they beat Miami?
I would take Miami. I would take most of these teams to beat Colorado. Yeah, BYU, fine. I would take Indiana to beat Colorado. We're talking about a Colorado team that...
I think it'd be a shootout. I think it'd be 45-42.
It's an I don't even know about that. I think it's an unimpressive conference. It's an unimpressive schedule. They should have lost to Baylor, and as a good team does, wins a game that they should have lost. Or at least that was a fortunate way to beat Baylor. So we're talking about a different kind of Colorado season if they do lose that game. I think we should just accept Colorado for who they are instead of trying to pound them into a square hole or whatever, circular peg.
Well, I'm just asking because there's a chance they find their way into the playoff.
Oh, I understand. I would have them losing said playoff because I don't think their offensive line is of playoff caliber, and I don't think their defensive line is deep enough that against some of these teams, they have playmakers on the defensive line. I just don't think they have the bodies that you'll need if you were to play against Texas or Oregon or Ohio State or Ole Miss or anything like that. I just think it might be a bloodbath in the second half. And we could definitely find out, but that would be my feeling.
Final team, Notre Dame. Notre Dame, 67% chance of making the college football playoff, 8th in our poll.
Yes.
I looked at this. I looked up and down here. I think Notre Dame beats BYU. I think Notre Dame beats Indiana.
Yeah.
For sure. I think Notre Dame can beat Miami. I think Notre Dame can beat Penn State.
Sure.
I think the cutoff for me is Georgia. I think with where Georgia's at right now, I think Notre Dame could win that game depending where it is. I got questions about Ole Miss and the way they're playing. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas. I think that part goes without saying.
Okay.
Tennessee, Georgia, like one of those two teams is going to be in this poll next week, not both. And so I'm like that to me. I think they could beat Tennessee. I'm not so sure about Georgia. Like, right, that's kind of the meaty middle for me with respect to Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is interesting. They've taken care of business against kind of nobody. Like, the Louisville game is impressive, period. Yes, the way they beat Louisville, good job. Texas A&M, farther and farther in the rearview mirror. I don't know, it's game one of a new coach. Did a great job winning on the road. They obviously have the embarrassing blip against NIU, and then it's just like, Georgia Tech backup quarterback, Stanford collapse team, Florida State collapse team, Miami of Ohio, Purdue collapse team. The data points on Notre Dame don't have me super confident. They can beat teams in this top 12 that have clear and obvious flaws. But, like, I don't know if they can beat Tennessee. Like, do you feel good about Riley Leonard throwing into the Tennessee defense? A beat-up offensive line trying to block the Tennessee front?
I think he'd be running into this defense is what he'd be doing.
Right. Eventually, you're going to have to throw on 3rd and 12, though.
I think that would be the mindset going up against some of these better defenses, yeah.
Right. And Tennessee has their own flaws. But just when you
Right.
look at what Notre Dame has accomplished and against whom they accomplished those things, like, probably take Bama. A decent chance I'd take Georgia. Decent chance I'd take Ole Miss. Decent chance I'd take Miami.
I think the matchup that frightens me is, especially since Notre Dame's got a bit of a patchwork secondary at this point after losing Benjamin Morrison.
Sure.
They've obviously lost some beef up front as well. A mobile quarterback who can extend the play and give talented receivers a chance to break off their route tree and find space.
Well, it's kind of everybody on here.
That's my point.
Oregon, yes. Ohio State, yes. Texas, maybe less so. Penn State, yes. Tennessee, yes. Alabama, yes. Georgia, somewhat. Miami, yes. Ole Miss, yes.
If you're talking about purely mobile quarterbacks, guys who have
Those
been
guys are
defined as
athletic
dual
enough
threat.
to buy time. Yeah.
Guys who have been defined as dual threat. I look at Ole Miss. I look at Miami.
Yeah.
Obviously, Alabama. I mean,
Tennessee. Nico's not fully
guess.
that, but he's athletic. Yeah.
there's just a lot on here that I think could give them trouble. So it's about half and half for me.
Yeah.
So look, write in solidverbal@gmail.com. Again, I've linked up the Verballer Top 12 poll if you're ever so inclined to go back and use that as a reference point. Maybe you disagree with how the poll is ranked out. I don't know. You have an opportunity to change that if you sign up at verballers.com. Commit that to memory.
Do it.
This week, Dan, we have two games that are a little bit earlier. We've got UCLA and Washington. Washington favored by 3.5 points. That'll be interesting. 9 o'clock on Fox. I believe on Friday. We've got Houston at Arizona. Arizona favored by about 1.5. That'll be an interesting contest, sort of at the back end of the Big 12.
Yep.
There are a bunch of other weekday games, to be clear, but those are two that I pulled out that I just wanted to make mention of. Our schedule for the week ahead, we will continue to do our preview episode on Thursday morning, as we have been doing now all season long. Big Ten Breakfast. We are getting weirder with Big Ten
Yes, we
Breakfast
are.
every week. That is on our YouTube channel. We post that every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So would encourage you to go and watch that. We do post the audio out on verballers.com as well for the audio only crowd. As far as Week 12's games go, we will, of course, find plenty of reasons to be interested in these games. It is lacking for star power, though.
Oh my God, I totally disagree.
Tennessee, Georgia is the big one. Right now, Georgia's favored by 9 points. You got Clemson against Pitt. You've got Arizona State at K-State,
That's
which
great.
is a really good game. You got your Oregon Ducks minus 14.5 going to Madison. Are you going to that game? Did you decide?
No, I don't think I'm going to that. I mean, look, It's 6:30 local time, so that means it's going to go until maybe
tough.
almost 10 p.m.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
I don't think There's a lot of good games I got to watch. It's okay.
Utah, Colorado favored by 10. Texas, Arkansas sometimes can get weird. LSU, Florida. Nebraska, USC. Mizzou, South Carolina.
I think these are all great.
Kansas versus BYU. BYU favored by 3.5 points.
Jalen Daniels, reborn.
We will talk about all these games on the Thursday episode.
Yeah.
That is all we have here on the Spillover episode. We encourage everybody to make sure you hit follow or subscribe wherever it is you are listening to the pod. Also, write in solidverbal@gmail.com. Also, if you can comment on the episode, you can do that on Spotify. You can do it a couple other places depending on where you listen.
Yeah.
Let us know what your thoughts are. YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, want to get your thoughts on, first off, how you would rank the Verballer Top 12 if you did not already vote. And then secondly, and perhaps more importantly, how some of these teams would fare against the Verballer Top 12. If push comes to shove, these matchups will probably never happen. But it's an interesting thought experiment now, since we're officially now in the season of doing these playoff rankings on Tuesday nights. We're starting to think up conference playoff scenarios, you name it. Weigh in. Let us know.
Where can people get your killer Solid Verbal patch hat that you're wearing right now?
You can go to merch.solidverbal.com.
Ooh.
Merch.solidverbal.com. We got a bunch of shirts there as well. I would encourage everybody to make sure it has a .solidverbal.com address at the end of it, because we've had some knockoffs appear on the internet. It's popular. People are that into the merch.
Thanks.
There are some knockoffs.
Singapore. Yeah.
Some knockoffs that have popped up. Make sure you're buying from solidverbal.com.
Please. That's it.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand, thank you for downloading, for listening, for supporting what we do. As always, we will talk to you on Thursday. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.